My name is Lula Thompson, 67 years old, and for 30 years, I've lived with chronic back pain while raising my son Michael alone. I gave him everything working through the pain to provide the life he deserved. When his twins were born, I helped as much as I could, but when my doctor said I needed to cut back, I gathered my courage to tell Michael. His response cut deeper than any physical pain I've ever felt. "Then you're just taking up space," he said. "Where are you watching from today? If you've ever had your worth reduced to your usefulness, hit that like button and subscribe. You might be surprised by how I discovered my value goes far beyond what I can do for others. I grew up in Millfield, a small town in Ohio, where everyone knew your business before you did. My parents owned a hardware store, and from the time I could count change, I was working the register after school. Hard work builds character, my father would say. By 16, I was managing inventory and helping with the books. My mother, always gentle but firm, taught me that family comes first, but not at the expense of your own well-being. A lesson I would forget for far too many years. I married Robert Chambers when I was 22. He was handsome, charming, and full of big dreams about moving to the city and making it big in real estate. My parents were cautious, but I was in love. We moved to Columbus, where I got a job as a secretary at an insurance company, while Robert bounced between sales jobs, never quite finding his footing. When I got pregnant with Michael, Robert seemed excited at first. We painted the spare room blue and yellow, bought a crib secondhand that Robert promised to refinish. But as my belly grew, so did his absences. Late nights at networking events, money disappearing from our account. When I was 7 months along, I came home from work to find his clothes gone, a note on the kitchen table. "I'm not cut out for this. I'm sorry." Just like that, I became a single mother before I'd even held my baby. I cried for 3 days, then pulled myself together. My parents offered to let me move back home, but pride kept me in Columbus. I had a job, a small apartment, and a baby on the way. We would make it work. Michael was born on a snowy January morning, 8 pounds 2 ounces of perfection, with a full head of dark hair and his father's green eyes. The moment the nurse placed him in my arms, I made a silent vow this child would never want for anything. I would give him everything I had, and then find more to give. Those early years were a blur of exhaustion and joy. I worked as a secretary during the day, leaving Michael with a neighbor who watched several children. Evenings and weekends, I waited tables at a local diner. Every extra dollar went into a coffee can labeled Michael's Future. I took just one picture each birthday to save on film, reused gift bags, darned socks, and shopped end-of-season clearance for clothes he'd grow into the following year. When Michael was 5, I took a better-paying job at a manufacturing plant that made auto parts. The hours were longer, the work physically demanding, but the pay and benefits made it worthwhile. I stood on concrete floors for 10-hour shifts operating machinery that filled the air with a fine metal dust that settled in my hair, my clothes under my fingernails. But I came home with enough money to move us to a small 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood with a good elementary school. The accident happened when Michael was 10. I was helping load a shipment when the pallet jack malfunctioned. One moment, I was upright, the next, I was on the floor, white-hot pain shooting through my lower back. Workers' compensation covered the medical bills and physical therapy. But the doctors were clear I had damaged several discs. The pain might improve with treatment, but it would never fully go away. I couldn't afford to stop working, so I found ways to manage. A back brace hidden under my clothes. Pain medication that made me foggy but functional. Hot baths at night while Michael did his homework at the bathroom counter, telling me about his day. I switched to a receptionist position at an accounting firm. Less money, but easier on my body. Michael was a good student, naturally bright in math and science. He had his father's charm, but thankfully a stronger sense of responsibility. Still, there were signs of entitlement I should have addressed. The expectation that his uniform would be clean for every game without him ever learning to use the washing machine. The sighs when dinner wasn't what he wanted. The Christmas lists that grew more expensive each year. "Mom, Jason's mother lets him stay out until 11 on weekends," he'd argue when I set a 10 o'clock curfew. "I'm not Jason's mother," I'd reply. "You're so old-fashioned," he'd complain, but there was never real malice in it. We were a team even when we disagreed. When Michael was accepted to Ohio State University, I cried with pride. My coffee can savings covered first-year tuition, but not much more. I took on a second job doing medical billing from home in the evenings. My back protested the extra hours at the computer, but seeing Michael thrive made it worthwhile. He majored in accounting, joining the firm where I worked as an intern his junior year. "Mrs. Thompson," his supervisor told me, "your son has a real future here. You should be proud." I was proud and exhausted and in constant pain. But watching Michael walk across the stage at graduation, I felt it had all been worth it. He was hired full-time at the firm after graduation. Within 2 years, he met Sophia, a nursing student with a warm laugh and practical nature. I liked her immediately. When they married, I used the last of my savings to help with the wedding, a modest but lovely affair at a local botanical garden. "You've given me everything, Mom," Michael said, as we danced at the reception, my back braced and medicated for the occasion. "I'm going to make sure you're taken care of from now on." I believed him, and for a while, it seemed true. They bought a house in a nice suburb, inviting me for Sunday dinners. Michael insisted I see a specialist for my back paying for treatments insurance wouldn't cover. Sophia would send me home with prepared meals for the week. They called regularly, included me in holidays and celebrations. Then the twins arrived. Emma and Jacob born 5 minutes apart, perfect and healthy and exhausting. Sophia's mother lived in Florida and couldn't help regularly. Michael's paternity leave was just 2 weeks. When Sophia looked at me, dark circles under her eyes, twins crying in stereo, and asked if I could come by for a few hours, how could I say no? Those first few months, I'd visit 2 or 3 times a week holding babies so Sophia could shower or nap or simply have her hands free for 30 minutes. My back would ache from the lifting and rocking, but the joy of holding my grandchildren balanced the discomfort. I'd return to my apartment, take extra pain medication, and lie with a heating pad until I could move normally again. "You're a lifesaver, Lula," Sophia would say, and I'd bask in the appreciation, the feeling of being needed. But those feelings would soon be tested in ways I never imagined. As the twins grew from infants to toddlers, the physical demands of caring for them increased exponentially, no longer content to be held or rocked. Emma and Jacob were in constant motion, crawling under furniture, climbing on everything needing to be lifted in and out of high chairs, car seats, and cribs. Each visit left me in greater pain, but I kept it to myself, not wanting to burden Michael and Sophia. The shift from occasional helper to regular childcare provider happened so gradually I barely noticed the tipping point. Michael received a promotion that required longer hours and occasional travel. Sophia was offered a part-time position at the hospital 3 days a week, too good an opportunity to pass up but creating a childcare gap. "Mom, would you be able to watch the kids on Tuesdays and Thursdays while Sophia works just from 8 to 3? Michael asked over Sunday dinner. "Daycare for twins is outrageous and we don't trust strangers." "Of course," I said without hesitation. How could I refuse? They needed me and I loved my grandchildren fiercely. The first few weeks of the new arrangement went smoothly enough. I'd arrive at their house by 7:45, coffee in hand, back brace already tightening my posture. Sophia would leave detailed instructions about naps and snacks before rushing off to work. The twins, now 2.5, had distinct personalities. Emma curious and verbal, Jacob quiet but mischievous. I'd read to them, take them to the backyard playground Michael had built, prepare lunch, and supervise naps. By the time Sophia returned, I'd be sitting on the couch, trying not to show how much pain I was in. "You're amazing with them," Sophia would say, And that praise kept me going through the heating pads and sleepless nights that followed each babysitting day. Then Michael's work schedule changed again. "The Minneapolis client needs me on site Wednesdays," he explained. "Could you possibly add Wednesdays to your babysitting days just for a few months?" 3 days a week became my new normal. The pain in my back increased to the point where I had trouble getting out of bed on the mornings after babysitting. I started taking more pain medication than prescribed, knowing it wasn't sustainable, but seeing no alternative. One Wednesday, while lifting Jacob into his high chair, I felt something shift in my lower back, a sensation like hot wire being threaded through my spine. I managed to secure him safely before crumpling to the kitchen floor, tears streaming down my face. I lay there for nearly 10 minutes before I could gather the strength to pull myself up using the counter. The twins watched with wide, confused eyes. "Gamma, owie?" Emma asked, her little face concerned. "Gamma's okay, sweetheart," I lied, reaching for the extra pain pills I'd started carrying in my purse. I didn't tell Michael or Sophia about the incident. Instead, I made an appointment with my doctor for the following week. The X-rays and MRI told the story my body had been trying to communicate significant degeneration in multiple discs, nerve impingement, and early signs of stenosis, narrowing of the spinal canal. "This level of childcare isn't sustainable for you, Lula," Dr. Peterson said bluntly. "You're risking permanent mobility issues if you continue this way. I'm recommending physical therapy twice weekly and a significant reduction in lifting and bending activities." I sat in my car after the appointment prescription for physical therapy in hand, wondering how I would tell Michael. The thought of disappointing him, of not being the support he needed, brought tears to my eyes. But Dr. Peterson's warnings echoed in my mind. If I became completely disabled, I'd be no help to anyone. The following Sunday at dinner, I planned to broach the subject, but Michael spoke first. "Mom, we've been thinking. With Sophia being offered more shifts at the hospital, it might make sense for you to watch the twins Monday through Thursday. We'd pick them up earlier on your physical therapy days, of course." My heart sank. 4 days a week. My doctor had just told me to cut back, not increase my childcare duties. Sophia looked at me expectantly while the twins played with their food beside her. "Actually," I began carefully, "I needed to talk to you both about the babysitting schedule. I saw Dr. Peterson this week and my back is getting worse. He's recommended I reduce the physical activity, not increase it." Michael frowned. "Mom, everyone has back pain at your age. You just need to do more stretches or something." "It's not just normal pain," I tried to explain. "The MRI shows significant degeneration. If I don't reduce the strain now, I could lose mobility altogether." "But what are we supposed to do?" Sophia asked, genuine stress in her voice. "Daycare for twins their age costs more than our mortgage. I'd have to quit my job." I felt trapped between my health and their needs. "I'm not saying I can't help at all," I clarified. "Maybe 1 or 2 days a week instead of 4. I love the twins, but by the end of each day with them, I can barely walk." Michael's expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "So you're just going to bail on us after all the help we've given you?" The help they'd given me, I was momentarily speechless. Yes, Michael had paid for some medical treatments, but compared to the decades of sacrifice, the physical toll on my body, the financial support I'd provided him through college, I pushed the thought away, not wanting to tally up debts between family. "I'm not bailing," I said evenly. "I'm trying to find a balance that works for everyone. Maybe we could look at some part-time daycare options or a mother's helper who could do the heavy lifting while I supervise." "We can't afford that," Michael said dismissively. "Honestly, Mom, what else are you doing with your time that's so important you're retired? This is what grandmothers do." His words stung. Was that all he saw when he looked at me? A convenient childcare solution? "Michael," Sophia interjected, "your mom is in pain. We should listen." "No," he cut her off. "We've built our lives around her help. We've turned down other options because she said she wanted to be involved." He turned back to me, frustration evident in every line of his face. "If you won't help us when we need it most, then what good are you? You're just taking up space." The room went silent. Even the twins seemed to sense the tension, their little forks paused mid-air. Sophia looked mortified, but Michael didn't take the words back. He stared at me, waiting for me to cave as I always had before. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not my back, but the pattern of putting everyone else first that had defined my entire life. I stood up slowly, gathering my purse. "I think I should go," I said quietly. "We can talk about this when you're ready to have a respectful conversation." "Mom, wait!" Sophia started, but Michael's cold silence drowned her out. I drove home with tears blurring my vision, his words echoing in my mind. "You're just taking up space." After everything I'd given, all I'd sacrificed, was that truly all the value he saw in me? A space filler, free childcare? I barely slept that night, replaying the conversation, wondering where I'd gone wrong as a parent to raise a son who could speak to me that way. By morning, I was physically ill from the stress and emotional pain, my back locked in spasm, as if emphasizing that my body, too, had reached its breaking point. The days following that Sunday dinner passed in a fog of hurt and disbelief. I expected Michael to call with an apology, to recognize the cruelty of his words. My phone remained silent. I sent a text the next day. "I love you and the twins. I hope we can talk soon." The response hours later was brief and cold. "We're figuring things out." By Wednesday, anxiety drove me to reach out to Sophia instead. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice hushed, as if she didn't want to be overheard. "Lula, I'm so sorry about Sunday," she said. "Michael was out of line." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, relief washing over me. "I've been so worried. Can we meet for coffee and talk about solutions that might work for everyone?" There was a pause. "Actually, we've already figured out childcare. My hospital supervisor connected us with another nurse who does home daycare. It's expensive, but..." She trailed off. "That's great," I said, trying to sound positive despite the clear message they didn't need me anymore. "When can I see the twins? Maybe I could take them for a few hours this weekend to give you and Michael some time alone." Another pause, longer this time. "Michael thinks it might be good to take a little break. He's still pretty upset. You know how he gets when he feels let down." I did know. My son had always had a stubborn streak, holding on to perceived slights with remarkable tenacity. But this wasn't a missed baseball game or a forgotten promise. This was my basic human dignity. "Sophia, are you saying I can't see my grandchildren because I can't physically babysit 4 days a week?" "It's just temporary," she said quickly. "Just until things cool down. You know I don't agree with him, but..." But she wouldn't stand against him. The unspoken end to her sentence hung in the air between us. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. Not really. "Please tell Emma and Jacob that Gamma loves them." "Of course," she promised, but we both knew the twins were too young to understand my sudden absence. The complete cutoff from my grandchildren was like losing a limb. I'd been seeing them almost daily, and now there was nothing. No sticky kisses, no little voices calling my name, no tiny hands reaching for mine. The silence in my apartment became oppressive, punctuated only by the ticking of the clock and occasional notification sounds from my phone that never turned out to be Michael. I canceled my physical therapy appointments. What was the point? The activity I needed to recover from was no longer part of my life. I stopped meeting my walking group at the mall, embarrassed to explain the family rift. I skipped church 2 Sundays in a row, unable to bear the well-meaning questions about my grandchildren. With each passing day, Michael's words took deeper root in my psyche. "You're just taking up space." Was that true? Now that I couldn't provide free childcare, was I without value? I'd defined myself as Michael's mother for so long. What was I without that role? I scrolled through photos on my phone, lingering on images of the twins, feeling the physical ache of missing them. In one picture, Jacob was reaching for me, mouth open in delighted laughter. In another, Emma slept against my shoulder, her little hand curled around my finger. Would they forget me? At their age, a few weeks was an eternity. I found myself sleeping more, eating less. The apartment grew cluttered as I let daily tasks slide. Pain became my constant companion, not just my back, but a deep hollow ache in my chest that no medication could touch. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the confrontation, a knock at my door roused me from an unplanned nap on the couch. I considered ignoring it, but the knocking persisted. I opened the door to find Grace, my neighbor from across the hall, holding a container of soup. "You haven't been collecting your mail," she said, eyeing me with concern. "The box was so full the carrier mentioned it to me. I hadn't even noticed." "Thank you," I said, taking the soup. "I've been a little under the weather." Grace, a retired nurse in her 70s, gave me an appraising look. "You've been more than a little under the weather, Lula Thompson. You've lost weight, your color is poor, and I haven't seen you leave this apartment in days." I started to make excuses, but to my horror, tears welled up instead. Grace guided me back to my couch, closed the door, and sat beside me. "Tell me what's happening," she said simply. And I did. The whole story poured out. My back problems, Michael's demands, the cruel words, the separation from my grandchildren. Grace listened without interruption, occasionally patting my hand. "He said, I'm just taking up space." I finished wiping my eyes with a tissue. "Maybe he's right. What good am I now?" Grace's expression hardened. "That's absolute nonsense, and if you weren't so beaten down right now, you'd know it. Your worth isn't measured by what you can do for others, especially not for an ungrateful son who's forgotten everything you sacrificed for him." Her directness startled me. "He's under a lot of pressure," I defended weakly. "And you weren't raising him alone with a bad back and multiple jobs?" She shook her head. "Lula, you're letting him define your value, and that's a power no one should have over you." She was right, but knowing it intellectually didn't immediately heal the emotional wound. "I miss my grandchildren," I whispered. "Of course you do," she said more gently. "And you'll see them again. But first, you need to take care of yourself. When's the last time you saw your doctor?" I couldn't remember. The days had blurred together. "That's what I thought," Grace said. "Tomorrow, you're coming with me to the community center. They have a chair yoga class specifically for people with back issues." "No arguments," she added when I started to protest. As she left soup container on my counter and a promise to knock on my door at 9 the next morning, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, a tiny spark of hope. Not that Michael would suddenly apologize or that things would go back to how they were, but hope that perhaps there was a way forward I couldn't yet see. The Riverside Community Center was housed in a renovated school building, its brick exterior softened by window boxes overflowing with petunias and marigolds. I'd driven past it hundreds of times without giving it a second thought. Now I followed Grace reluctantly through its doors, self-conscious in my stretch pants and oversized t-shirt. "The yoga class is in the old gymnasium," Grace explained, guiding me down a hallway decorated with local artwork. "Terry's wonderful. She used to be a physical therapist before she retired." The gym had been transformed with soft lighting and calming blue paint. About 15 people, mostly women around my age or older, sat on chairs arranged in a semicircle. Some chatted casually while others stretched. I hung back near the door. "I don't belong here," I whispered to Grace. "I should go." "You absolutely belong here," countered a cheerful voice. A trim woman in her 60s approached us, her silver hair pulled into a neat ponytail. I'm Terry. First class? I nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. Perfect. We were all new once. Grace told me a bit about your back issues. Don't worry, we'll modify everything as needed. No pain, that's our first rule. She led me to an empty chair, introduced me briefly to the group, and began the class before I could dwell on my discomfort. The exercises were gentle but effective. Seated twists, shoulder rolls, supported back bends, using the chair for stability. Terry moved around the room, making small adjustments to form, offering encouragement. Breathe into the tight spots, she instructed. Honor what your body is telling you today. By the end of the hour, my back felt looser than it had in weeks. The constant knot of tension between my shoulder blades had softened. I hadn't realized how much emotional stress had been manifesting physically until some of it released. Coffee in the lounge after class, Terry announced. Newcomers especially welcome. I tried to make an excuse to leave, but Grace wouldn't hear of it. The social part is as important as the physical. She insisted, steering me toward a sunny room where tables were arranged informally around a coffee station. I found myself seated with Grace and 3 other women from the class. Margaret, a former librarian, with a quick smile. Darlene, who walked with a cane and had the most contagious laugh I'd ever heard. And Helen, quiet but observant, her kind eyes magnified behind thick glasses. First time's always the hardest, Margaret said, passing me a styrofoam cup of surprisingly good coffee. I nearly ran out the door my first day. What made you stay? I asked. Stubbornness? She laughed, and I was tired of feeling invisible. That resonated deeply. Since Michael's cutting words, I'd felt like a ghost in my own life. The conversation flowed easily, touching on neighborhood news recommendations for back-friendly mattresses, complaints about Florida children who called only when they needed something. I found myself relaxing, even smiling occasionally. My son told me I was selfish for not selling my house and moving in with them to help with their kids, Darlene shared, adding an extra packet of sweetener to her coffee. Wanted me in their basement apartment. Said it was silly for me to have a whole house to myself. What did you do? I asked. Took up salsa dancing and bought a convertible. She grinned. The look on his face when I drove up in that red car was worth every penny. The women laughed, and I found myself joining in the sound unfamiliar to my own ears. It's not that we don't love our families, Helen added more seriously. But at some point, you have to say, I've already raised my children. This is my time now. I nodded, though the concept felt foreign. When had I last done anything solely for myself? As we prepared to leave, Terry approached me. We could use some help at the reception desk one morning a week. Just greeting people, answering the phone. Interested? My first instinct was to say no. What did I know about volunteer work? But something about the simple act of being asked, of being seen as capable of contribution, moved me. I could try Wednesdays, I heard myself saying. Perfect, Terry beamed. 9 to noon, nothing strenuous, and you can sit in our ergonomic chair. Walking back to the apartment with Grace, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Thank you, I said simply. For what? Dragging you out of your pity party. Her tone was teasing, but kind. Yes, actually. For seeing me when I was invisible even to myself. The next day, I rescheduled my missed physical therapy appointments. I cleaned my apartment, threw out the accumulation of junk mail, and opened all the windows to let in fresh air. I pulled out a notebook and made a list titled, Things I Used to Enjoy Before I Was Just Michael's Mom. Reading mysteries, container gardening, birdwatching, baking bread from scratch. Simple pleasures I'd abandoned when childcare consumed my time and energy. Each morning, I did the gentle yoga moves Terry had taught us. I returned to the community center for the next class, then the next. I started my volunteer shift at the reception desk, discovering I enjoyed greeting the regulars and helping newcomers find their way. One Wednesday morning, a familiar voice called my name. I looked up from the reception desk to see Susan, who had worked with me at the accounting firm years ago. Lula Thompson, I thought that was you, she exclaimed. What are you doing here? I volunteer on Wednesdays, I explained. What brings you in? Watercolor class, she said, gesturing to an art supply bag. Retired last year and promised myself I'd finally learn to paint. What about your grandkids? I thought you were watching them full-time these days. The question stung less than it would have weeks earlier. That didn't work out, I said simply. My back couldn't handle it. Their loss, Susan said with characteristic bluntness. Listen, a bunch of us former office ladies meet for lunch once a month. You should join us next Tuesday. Another invitation. Another thread connecting me to a world beyond my apartment and my estrangement from Michael. I'd like that, I said, and meant it. 3 months passed this way. I still thought of Michael and the twins daily, still felt the ache of their absence. But gradually, I was building a life that didn't revolve around being needed by them. I had my chair yoga class 3 times weekly, my volunteer shift at the center lunch with the office ladies monthly, and a growing friendship with Grace, who introduced me to foreign films at the Art House Theater downtown. My back pain, while not gone, became more manageable with consistent physical therapy and appropriate exercise. I learned modifications for daily activities that reduced strain. I slept better, ate regularly again, even splurged on a new haircut that framed my face more flatteringly than the utilitarian style I'd worn for years. One evening, I sat on my small balcony, watching the sunset, a library book open in my lap when my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. My heart raced as I answered. Hello, Mom. His voice sounded strained. We need to talk. And just like that, my carefully reconstructed peace was shaken by the prospect of confronting what I'd been both dreading and hoping for, a chance to heal the rift with my son. Thanksgiving was approaching, marking 3 months since I'd seen my son or grandchildren. The holiday had always been spent at Michael and Sophia's house in recent years. I'd arrive early to help with preparation, bringing my signature pumpkin pies and cranberry relish. This year, I had made no plans, trying not to dwell on the family gathering I'd be missing. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, I sat with my new friends from the community center after yoga class, discussing our holiday plans. My daughter's family is coming from Cincinnati, Margaret shared. 5 grandkids under one roof for 4 days. Pray for me. I'm doing a cruise, Darlene announced. Caribbean sunshine instead of family drama. Yes, please. What about you, Lula? Helen asked gently. I stirred my coffee. No plans yet, I said, trying to sound casual. Might volunteer at the shelter dinner downtown. They exchanged glances but didn't press. Over these months, they'd heard pieces of my situation with Michael, offering support without judgment. They understood the complex emotions around family estrangement during holidays. Whatever you decide, Terry said, remember you have people here who care about you. That afternoon, with their words echoing in my mind, I made a decision. After weeks of therapy, both physical and emotional, through regular conversations with my new friends, I felt strong enough to reach out to Michael. Not from a place of desperation or to beg for inclusion, but to express my feelings honestly and open a door to possible reconciliation. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter, pen on paper, not an email or text that could be easily dismissed. I chose my words carefully, focusing on I statements rather than accusations. Dear Michael, I began. As Thanksgiving approaches, I'm reflecting on all I'm grateful for, including you and your family. These months of separation have been painful, but they've also given me time to think about our relationship and what might have led us to this point. I want you to know that I love you deeply. That has never changed and never will. You're my son, and nothing can sever that bond in my heart. I'm proud of the man you've become in so many ways. Your work ethic, your devotion to your family, your intelligence. When you said I was just taking up space, Those words hurt me profoundly. They made me feel that my only value to you was as unpaid childcare, not as the mother who has loved you your entire life. I understand the pressure you're under with 2 young children and demanding careers. I want to support you and Sophia and be part of the twins' lives. But I need you to understand that my physical limitations are real, not an excuse or a betrayal. My ability to help has to be balanced with what my body can handle. Perhaps we can find a middle ground, a way for me to be involved that respects both your family's needs and my health. I miss Emma and Jacob terribly, and I miss you and Sophia too. I hope we can talk soon with open hearts and minds. Whatever you decide about Thanksgiving, please know that I'm here ready to listen and work toward healing. All my love, Mom. I mailed the letter the next morning, not expecting an immediate response. I'd learned through these months of rebuilding myself that expectations often lead to disappointment. Instead, I continued with my new routines, yoga, volunteering a birdwatching walk with Grace. 2 days after sending the letter, I returned from the grocery store to find Michael sitting on the bench outside my apartment building. My heart leapt at the sight of him, then constricted with anxiety. He stood as I approached, looking uncomfortable, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. "Got your letter," he said without preamble. "Can we talk?" I nodded, leading him upstairs to my apartment. He looked around, as if seeing it for the first time, noticing the changes I'd made. New curtains in a cheerful yellow, a small writing desk by the window, potted herbs on the balcony. "You've done some redecorating," he observed. "A few changes." I agreed, setting down my grocery bags. "Would you like some coffee?" He nodded, and I busied myself with the familiar ritual of brewing coffee, giving us both a moment to gather our thoughts. When I brought 2 mugs to the living room, Michael was standing by my bookshelf, examining a framed photo of the twins from their 2nd birthday. "They miss you," he said, still looking at the picture. "Jacob keeps asking for Gamma." The simple statement pierced my heart. I miss them too, so much. We sat across from each other, the coffee table between us like a neutral zone. Michael took a sip from his mug, then set it down with deliberate care. "Your letter," he began, then stopped. "I didn't know what to expect when I saw your handwriting on the envelope. Maybe accusations, maybe begging to see the kids. It wasn't either of those things." "I didn't write it to make you feel guilty," I said. "I just wanted you to understand how I felt." He nodded slowly. "The thing is, Mom, childcare costs are killing us. Sophia had to cut back her hours because we can't afford full-time care for both kids. We had a system that worked, and then suddenly, you couldn't do it anymore." His tone held a hint of the old resentment. I took a deep breath. "I understand the financial pressure. Truly, I do. But Michael, my body was breaking down. The doctor said if I continued that schedule, I could end up unable to walk, let alone care for the twins. Would that have been better for anyone?" "You could have given us more warning," he countered. "Found us alternatives." "You're right," I conceded. "I should have spoken up sooner about how much pain I was in. That's on me." But Michael looked me in the eye and tell me, "Am I just a babysitter to you? Is that all our relationship has become?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "No, of course not. You're my mother." "Then why did you cut me off completely when I couldn't provide childcare? Why haven't I seen my grandchildren in 3 months?" "I was angry," he admitted. "Frustrated. We were counting on you, and it felt like you were backing out of a commitment." "Would you speak to a daycare provider the way you spoke to me?" I asked quietly. "Would you tell them they're just taking up space if they couldn't accommodate your schedule?" He looked down at his hands. "No." Then why was it okay to say that to your mother? The question hung in the air between us. Michael's shoulders slumped slightly. It wasn't okay, he finally said. I was out of line, way out of line. I don't know, stress doesn't cover it. Drowning, maybe. Between work demands and the costs of raising twins and the house needing a new roof. He rubbed his face. But that's no excuse for how I treated you. I'm sorry, Mom. Really sorry. It was the apology I'd been waiting for, but I needed more than words. Thank you for saying that. I accept your apology. But Michael, we need to talk about moving forward. I can't go back to 4 days a week of childcare. My body simply won't allow it. I understand that now, he said. Jake from the community center called me, the one who teaches the senior fitness class. He explained about your back condition in terms I could understand. Why didn't you tell me it was that serious? I tried, I said, but you didn't want to hear it. He nodded, acknowledging the truth of this. Sophia and I have been talking. We're looking into a nanny share with another family in the neighborhood. It's still expensive, but more manageable than full-time daycare for two. That sounds like a good solution, I said cautiously. We're also wondering. He hesitated. Would you consider 1 day a week, maybe Sundays, so we could have some family time together? No heavy lifting required. The olive branch was being extended. Part of me wanted to grab it immediately to agree to anything that would reunite me with my grandchildren. But the lessons of the past few months had taken root. I'd love to spend Sundays with all of you, I said. But Michael, I need to be clear about something. I'm your mother, not your employee. I need to be treated with respect even when I can't meet your expectations. That's fair, he said quickly. More than fair. And I'd like us to try some family counseling, I added. Just a few sessions to help us communicate better. My friend at the community center recommended someone who specializes in family relationships. I expected resistance, but Michael surprised me. Actually, Sophia suggested the same thing. She's been pretty upset with me about how I handled all this. She never agreed with cutting you off from the kids. A wave of gratitude for my daughter-in-law washed over me. I'd like to thank her for that. She'd like to see you, Michael said. The twins, too. Would this Sunday work? A trial run for our new arrangement. I smiled, genuine joy bubbling up for the first time in our conversation. Sunday would be perfect. As Michael prepared to leave, he paused at the door. You look different, Mom. Good different. What have you been doing? I considered the question. Living for myself, I suppose. For the first time in a very long time. He nodded thoughtfully. It suits you. After he left, I sat on my balcony processing what had just happened. The reconciliation I'd hoped for was beginning, but on new terms. Terms that acknowledged my needs as well as his family's. It wasn't perfect, and we had work to do, but it was a start. I called Grace to share the news. He actually apologized. I told her, still somewhat amazed. And he's agreed to family counseling. Good for him, she said. And good for you for standing your ground. Are you going to be okay with just Sundays? Yes, I said, realizing it was true. Because now I have a life of my own for the other 6 days. That Sunday, when I arrived at Michael and Sophia's house, the twins rushed to me with squeals of gamma that brought tears to my eyes. I knelt carefully to their level, mindful of my back, but unwilling to miss their enthusiastic hugs. Sophia embraced me next. I'm so sorry, Lula, she whispered. I should have stood up for you. You're doing it now, I assured her. That's what matters. The day was filled with simple pleasures. Reading books with the twins, a family lunch, watching Michael push them on the backyard swings. My back twinged occasionally, but nothing like the debilitating pain I'd experienced during full days of childcare. I was present enjoying my grandchildren without the physical toll of being their primary caregiver. As I prepared to leave, Sophia walked me to my car. Michael told me you were going to family counseling with us, she said. Thank you for being willing to try. I want us to be healthy, all of us, I replied. Including me. That's new for me, considering my own health as important as everyone else's. She smiled. It's a good lesson for the twins to learn too, that Gamma takes care of herself because she matters. Her words stayed with me during the drive home. Because I matter. Not because of what I could do for others, but simply because I existed. The concept was still new, still taking root, but growing stronger each day. The first family counseling session was scheduled for the following week. I was nervous, but hopeful. We had a long way to go, but the journey had begun. 1 year later, I stood in my new apartment, arranging fresh flowers in a vase by the window. The senior-friendly community I'd moved to was 15 minutes from Michael and Sophia's home. Close enough for regular visits, but with enough distance to maintain my independence. My first-floor unit featured wider doorways, grab bars in the bathroom, and a small patio perfect for my container garden. More importantly, it offered a community of peers and activities designed for active seniors. The physical transformation in my body over the past year had been remarkable. Consistent chair yoga had evolved into gentle flow classes. My back pain, while not eliminated, had reduced to manageable levels. I no longer needed prescription pain medication, relying instead on over-the-counter options on occasional bad days. But the internal transformation had been even more profound. The woman who once defined herself solely as Michael's mother now had a rich, multifaceted identity. I taught a weekly crafting class at the community center. I served on the social committee in my new housing complex. I maintained friendships that had nothing to do with my family role. The doorbell rang, signaling my Sunday visitors. I opened the door to find Michael, Sophia, and the twins, now 4 years old and bursting with energy. Emma carried a handmade card, Jacob a slightly squished bouquet of dandelions. "Happy birthday, Gamma!" they chorused, presenting their gifts with pride. "These are beautiful," I exclaimed, accepting both treasures with appropriate reverence. "Thank you." "We're taking you to brunch," Sophia announced. "The twins have been practicing their restaurant manners all week." "Very impressive," I laughed, gathering my purse and sweater. "Lead the way, birthday squad." Our Sunday routine had evolved over the past year. Sometimes they visited me, sometimes I went to their house. The activities varied: picnics in the park, movies on rainy days, trips to the Children's Museum. What remained constant was the respect and boundaries we'd established through our counseling sessions. Those initial meetings with Dr. Rivera had been challenging, but transformative. Michael had confronted his tendency to take me for granted, recognizing patterns learned from childhood when his needs necessarily came first. I had acknowledged my difficulty setting boundaries, my habit of sacrificing my well-being rather than disappointing others. Healthy families have healthy boundaries, Dr. Rivera had emphasized repeatedly. Love without respect isn't sustainable. We'd also explored the generational patterns at play, how my parents had prioritized work and sacrifice, teaching me to measure my worth by what I could provide others. How I'd unintentionally passed that message to Michael, who then expected the same from me. "We're breaking that cycle," Michael had said in our final session. "For the twins, they need to see that everyone in the family matters, not just for what they can do, but for who they are." At the restaurant, we were seated at a corner table with a view of the garden. The twins, true to their promise, used their inside voices and kept their napkins on their laps. Michael ordered mimosas for the adults, apple juice in fancy glasses for the children. "A toast," he proposed, raising his glass. "To Mom, who taught me the most important lesson of all, sometimes by example and sometimes by standing up to me when I needed it most." "To Gamma," the twins echoed, carefully clinking their juice glasses. After brunch, we returned to my apartment for cake and presents. The twins had helped bake the cake, evident in its slightly lopsided frosting, making it all the more precious. Michael and Sophia's gift was a digital picture frame preloaded with family photos. "There's something else," Michael said, handing me an envelope. "From all of us." Inside was a certificate for a weekend painting workshop at a lakeside retreat center. "You mentioned wanting to try watercolors," Sophia explained. "This includes accommodations and all materials." "It's perfect," I said, genuinely touched by their thoughtfulness. A gift that recognized me as a person with interests beyond family obligations. As the afternoon wound down, Emma asked to see my scrapbooks, a hobby I'd recently rediscovered. We sat on the floor with cushions supporting my back, looking through old photos. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing to a faded picture of me as a child standing proudly beside a bicycle. "That's me when I was about your age," I explained. "It was my first bike, bright blue with streamers on the handlebars." "You were a kid?" Jacob asked incredulously, making the adults laugh. I confirmed. "Everyone was young once, even Gamma." "What games did you play?" Emma wanted to know. For the next hour, I shared stories from my childhood. Hopscotch patterns drawn with chalk on sidewalks, catching lightning bugs in jars on summer evenings, making paper dolls from old catalogs. The twins listened with rapt attention, fascinated by this glimpse into a world without tablets or streaming services. "You know," Michael commented as we cleaned up afterward, "I don't think I ever asked you about your childhood. Not really." "You were a child yourself," I said. "Children naturally see parents as just parents, not as people with their own stories." "Still," he said, "I wish I'd asked." "You're asking now," I pointed out. "And the twins are learning to see me as a whole person from the beginning. That's progress." After they left laden with leftover cake and promises to call during the week, I sat on my patio watching the sunset. My birthday had been a perfect reflection of the new balance we'd achieved. Family connection without suffocation, love with healthy boundaries. The journey to this place had been painful at times. Michael's cruel words had cut deeply. "You're just taking up space." But in an ironic way, they had also freed me. Confronting that pain had forced me to examine my self-worth, to recognize that my value wasn't tied to my utility to others. I thought about the many women my age in similar situations, caught between aging parents, adult children, and grandchildren trying to meet everyone's needs while ignoring their own. Taught from childhood that self-sacrifice was the highest form of love, that setting boundaries was selfish, that their worth depended on what they could do for others. But what if the most loving thing we can do for our families is to model self-respect? To show younger generations that aging doesn't diminish our right to consideration, that illness or physical limitations don't reduce our worth as human beings. Sometimes the most painful words can lead to the most necessary changes. Michael's hurtful statement became the catalyst for transformation, not just in our relationship, but in my relationship with myself. In setting boundaries and requiring respect, I'd discovered parts of myself that had been submerged under decades of caregiving. The space I occupy in this world is valuable, not because of what I can provide to others, but simply because I am here with my own dreams, needs, and wisdom to share. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you balance your own needs with the needs of those you love? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life journeys of healing and growth. Share with someone who might need to hear that they're valuable beyond what they can do for others. Thank you for being part of this supportive community where we can share our truths and find strength in each other's stories.